Welcome to the Kawartha Small Business Podcast, where we believe the Kawarthas can be the most thriving region in Canada for small businesses. I'm Brian Rump from Profit Coach.
And I'm Matt Garrity from Matty G Digital.
And before we get started, head over to kawarthasmallbusinesspodcast.ca/checklist and download Matt and Brian's marketing checklist for Kawartha small businesses. We are recording from the Thrive podcast studio at Thrive Co-working Community, 18 Kent Street West in downtown Lindsay. And today we are talking about something that came up in a previous podcast, and that was event sponsorships. You were, I think, at the fair and just noticed lots of signs on the fence, and we started down a bit of a discussion and decided to do a whole episode on when does it make sense to sponsor events, and what are you getting, and why is it that you go to the fair or certain places and you'll see signs taped to the fence, and other places you get a program book and there's lists of sponsors. So tell me more about kind of what made you want to talk about that.
I vaguely remember the conversation, and I thought we were having a good conversation. But I think the best way for me to put it, even as a marketer, is, as you said, like, I'm on the fence about it. Like, do you sponsor events? Is it worth your time? Is it worth your money? There's a part of me that, I think I mentioned with the Lex specifically, like the Lindsay exhibition, looked at it a couple years ago from an advertising perspective and decided not to. But at the same time, I was just like, my ego was like, how cool would it be to be a sponsor of the Lex? So all those people that walk through see your name. And I love it from a brand awareness perspective. And that's what, in so many cases, I'm about 50% of what I talk about is probably just creating awareness so people know what you're all about. So that's really exciting to me, is I'm going to get a bunch of awareness. But what's that awareness worth? Is it good awareness? I think people are blinded by those ads more often than not. And it's not the Lex in particular. I don't want to pick on anything in general, whether it's like a hockey game, any sort of event, like an outdoor street festival, a fair. There's tons of fairs around September, around Kawartha Lakes, and thinking about, like, there's a lot of great opportunity to get your name out there, your business out there. I think it even trickles down to, like, signage on the street and stuff, like the community board or people that put signs up on the street. And we just finished the election here. Did people become blind to those signs? Do you see other signs out there for your business? Like, I think, maybe one of the better marketing conversations we could have. And I don't want to talk very long about it. Not very long, but we could talk for hours about it, because I don't think there's a right or wrong answer.
Yeah, I think it, like everything, it depends. I think events have a place in a marketing strategy and an awareness strategy. I think for most small businesses, what always frustrates me is there will be people who will pay nothing. They don't want to do any type of advertising, but then they'll pay, $5,000 to be the big sign at the Lindsay exhibition. So for one weekend, they get all these people who maybe see their sign and know what to do, but then if you try to go Google them, you can't find them. Or people think, well, I'll sponsor this and it's my magic bullet to, like, doing some advertising. So in those cases, I don't think it's very good. There is a reason why some of the big brands will always sponsor those things. So, for example, if you go to these events, there's often, like, you say there's 5 banks in town. 3 of them are probably sponsoring, depending on what their budgets are or who got to the right person. They're sponsoring to just get their logo in with everyone else's, and they have they need probably millions of impressions sort of as a corporation throughout the year. So they just want to be everywhere. So it makes sense for them. And sponsoring the local fair, is something that's probably cheap for them on like a national level, but like really expensive to small businesses. So it makes sense for them. They want to be there. They want their logo to be seen by people. To contrast that with if you're not doing other types of marketing, often I think people sponsor the events just because they know somebody who's selling ads for events, or they like the events. So they're like,
Sure.
oh, I love going to there. So yeah, wouldn't it be cool to see my logo there? So then they're like, well, I did advertising. My brand and logo is here. But does that make sense? Is it the best use of your marketing dollars? That's like a different discussion.
It's funny because I have had that conversation a few times where people are deciding, oh, should I do social media posts, or I'm thinking about wrapping my car,
Yeah.
or I'm going to put a bunch of signs up and just stick them into people's lawns and stuff like that. I don't know if it works like singularly. If you're going to do one or the other, I don't think that you've probably really have a sound strategy whatsoever. Like, we know that people interact with a brand a lot. There's different numbers out there. I usually say 12 times before some people reach out. I think I heard too, like, people need to see your name 7 times for them to just remember.
Even know you exist.
That's like just from a psychological perspective. So somewhere between that 7 and 12 interactions, that's when they're actually going to reach out to you. And so if you're deciding, okay, if it's one thing or the other, then it's not going to work.
Yeah.
It's probably
And
not
that's
going to
where-
work, right?
Like, to me, the best answer is sure, both. Like,
Of course,
do it
yeah.
all if you have the budget to do it. But if you don't have the budget to do it, like, you need to start from there. And I think my frustration with events locally is oftentimes, they're all not for profits or organizations. They're trying to raise money for the event. And their motivation is, okay, we need to go find some sponsors to pay for this event, versus, hey, we have this great event. A lot of people are guaranteed to be there. Let's use it as a business asset to sell impressions of our audience. When that's the case, I think they're definitely worth money. You get the, people will put in like a derby car at the Lex because of, you get a full crowd of people who want to see like, that derby car with your branding on it. Kind of makes sense, especially if they do something that people just remember. But if you don't have a good website, if someone Googles it and can't find you, like, that's kind of still a waste of money compared to maybe some other things that you can try.
The Derby car one's a good example. It's going to seem a bit too singular with my critique in a second, but if you hear me out, I would never put my logo on a Derby car because I don't want to see people seeing my brand destroyed on a car, right? So, like, I wouldn't put on something that's going to get burned down or blown up, or I don't want to have my brand on a urinal. That's a good example where people are peeing right in front of. I don't want people, that's going to get gross, pooping on my logo, right? Like, that's not a good brand visual. But that's what people have to think about when it comes to like these physical things and like actual like physical marketing. Like,
and sometimes you maybe want that, or depending again what your brand is, maybe you want to be in front of the urinal, right?
I find like I've come to terms more with traditional marketing with more broad type of products and services. So with Managey Digital, do I want everyone to know that I exist? Probably not, because I don't want to work with every single person. Do I want every business owner in Lindsay to know who I am? No. Do I want every business owner in Lindsay who's looking for my marketing services to know who I am? Yes, that I do. That's super niche though. I don't care if everybody in Lindsay knows that Managey Digital exists. So I've like often become closed-minded to traditional marketing with that type of service. Thrive is different. It's still niche, but it's more broad than it is Managey Digital. Thrive is people that want to work or do work, whether it's an individual starting their business, or it's an individual that has a business, or it's an individual that's working for another business and needs away from home. That's more broad. I'm way more open to advertising on physical type of marketing or traditional marketing with something that's more broad. So, like, would Profit Coach make sense to have a car in the Derby? No.
No.
Does it make sense to have a billboard somewhere? No. Does it make sense to have a targeted ad in maybe the Advocate? Maybe. That's a conversation, right?
Yeah, that part's, yeah, it's not like a no. It's in a realm of conversation. And then when you're in that realm, that's where you take, here's my options. Here's how much each costs. Here's how much money I have.
Yeah.
And then you can start making some decisions and trying some things.
I have a friend that is currently running a web design agency and also wants to start a clothing line. His hope is that the clothing line will take off and he can probably stop doing the web design stuff.
Yeah.
The clothing line makes way more sense to actually go on billboards or go on like the head sponsor, the Lex or that big event or that fair. Everyone needs clothes. Every man that is alive needs to wear a shirt, and they sell shirts for men. That's broad appeal. So that makes perfect sense to me. So that's why I will advocate for that always.
Yeah, I think it's knowing what the mix is, knowing what's there. I think, when you dive into the sponsorships, there's other reasons people do it. So sometimes it is, hey, I just like this.
Yeah.
Or I think of, the Grove Theater, for example, in Fenland Falls. I donate personally to that a little bit. I don't corporately sponsor it, but if there was a package where it was like basically guaranteeing buying X number of tickets throughout the year, that might make sense. So like, yes, I'm on a list somewhere, that's okay, but really I'm doing it because I like it, and I'm choosing that as maybe the way to either entertain clients or give some tickets to something, prospects or existing clients or something like that, and make it an event out of it. But it's not really about putting my logo somewhere because there's probably other ways to get seen.
Because I think people become blind to it also. They talked about slider blindness being a thing like 8 years ago when I got into digital marketing, where you used to get on someone's homepage and they'd have slider images, right?
Yeah.
So it would say one thing with one image and like seconds later it would change to a new one. And then people got blind to it because they were just like, we don't want to sit through there. We thought we were giving them more information, but they didn't care.
Yeah.
Or they weren't paying enough attention. They'd look above it and elsewhere and move on. I think about that, and I probably think about it harder than maybe the people selling the ads, because I don't know, I have a passion and an interest in looking at ads. But when I go to places, like when we were at the hockey game the other day, now we sound like elitists, but when we were at the hockey game or like I'm at a fair or anywhere, like I see like sponsorship by, I get an email every once in a while from an organization at the bottom. It's like, here are all our sponsors. And I'm like, who else is looking at this other than me? Are other people like actually recognizing like that's a business or that they've sponsored this? And I don't know if people actually are paying attention to that. They must be though.
Yeah, I think maybe, and I think this is also interesting because it is about sometimes the people selling it. It's just about selling it, and it's usually about them. It's not about the audience. So I think that's where, if you are going to do something like that, it probably makes more sense to be the top sponsor, where you have your logo at the top and the biggest. I think of different events where they'll have like a printed booklet, and on the back will be like, thank you to our sponsors. And there will be like a level where there's like one big logo, and then right below it, there might be 3 in a row, slightly smaller.
Sure.
And then maybe a whole, but like they have different tiers. And then there's like a whole mess of like shorter ones. And I'm probably going to scan the top and see the top few tiers, but then here's our million sponsors at the lowest level is just like, I don't know what the value is for that in terms of impressions. And again, it's completely fine if it's like, hey, I like this event, I'm going. Yeah. Sure, I'll sponsor it because I want it to exist.
Yeah.
It's like that, in Fenland Falls, I was on the Chamber of Commerce for years. One of the events the Chamber runs there is Santa Day. Great event, costs tens of thousands of dollars to run, needs a lot of sponsorship. I, we've made some personal donations, but as a business, I'm like, it doesn't make sense for me to sponsor at the lowest level because I am not really getting any impressions. And at those levels, sometimes it's just, we'll put your name on a list in the sponsors, and like people aren't really looking through it that much. But I still want it to exist. It's a great free day. Yeah. So I'll, kick in a little bit, but it's not really a good business marketing decision.
So they always talk about impressions when they're selling them. So that's the amount of times someone saw the ad. They'll sometimes talk about reach, which is unique people that have seen the ad. Maybe it makes more sense at a fair versus a billboard or an electronic billboard, because I've had those pitches as well where they're like, this is a busy intersection in this town. It gets 20,000 views a day.
Yeah.
And I always think 20,000 views of people that are driving fast sometimes. Maybe they're driving slow and they're looking at stuff passing by. Maybe they're driving with their kids. Maybe they're driving with their buddy. Those 20,000 impressions to me, I'm so critical of and so suspect. Maybe a fair is different. You're walking through, you're staring at stuff. You just spent money to walk into this venue and you're looking around. Maybe that makes a lot more sense than billboards or like an electronic billboard.
Yeah, I think having a strategy for events, again, depending what you're doing, makes sense. We went to a few Electric City Football Club games. I thought they did a great job of, community sponsors. And when you were sitting at the field, they had like sort of banners around the perimeter. And I was just looking at them all to be like, oh, I wonder who sponsored this. And there's, I think a couple thousand people at that event, and people sponsored for the summer. Mm-hmm. So it kind of made sense if you were a local business looking for those, general awareness of things. And people are sitting there, just you're bored before the game starts. So you're kind of reading stuff, looking at banners. So it does make sense sometimes to like just capture people in a different spot.
I think it makes sense. And I was at that the home opener, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The regular season home opener. And I saw that and I started thinking, like, does this make sense for me? Eagle came in. I was like, this would be cool. I also started thinking about that made sense because it was a really, really, really well done presentation there.
Yeah.
The field was beautiful. The ads, beautiful. Brand new logo, brand new jerseys, everything. The aesthetic in there was beautiful. I would have been happy and proud to put my logo on that. Would I have been happy and proud to put my logo on this doesn't even make sense, an apron on a cow at a farm? No, that's completely different. I don't even know what that is.
Yeah.
But like, you know what I'm getting at? Like I was critical of like, okay, would I put my name and stuff on there? There, I absolutely would, and that would make a ton of sense. I think there's a bit of prestige. It makes you feel as if, okay, people see those ads like, okay, these people are maybe like good at what they do.
Yeah, I think it has to make sense. The other, this links into, that impression of like, are they good at what they do? And sometimes you're like, oh, this looks expensive. If they can afford to sponsor this, they must be a good business. And that links me to, niche like conferences. So I've been to a lot of conferences as a sponsor, or like you buy a table at a conference, and there's always like the presenting sponsor for breakfast. So you're paying for breakfast, and often what they give you is like breakfast sponsorship. They might give you 10 minutes to do a talk, but you're paying for that slot. And depending on the conference, like that comes with like a big price tag. Like it could be, 5, 10, even more thousands of dollars. Mm-hmm. So like a company who has the purse strings to be able to do that just shows like they're very professional and they can do it. And it makes sense if that's your target audience sitting there having breakfast. They probably might not be as engaged as like another type of sponsorship, but it's definitely the awareness that you want.
Yeah, it's interesting. And then I'm thinking about events that I've been to in the last 6 months, and which of those brands do I remember? And it's the big brands. And it's not because I care more about big brands and I'm anti-shop local. But I remember the big brands because I've seen them a bunch. I've seen them at that event. I've seen them on TV. I've heard of them on the radio. I've seen them online. It goes back to where I started. I didn't mean to make this connection in my head, but I remember the ones that I see all over the place. And frankly, like the ones that have just done a sign or a billboard or a postcard in the mail, I don't remember who those people are. They've not incepted my mind enough, like the movie Inception, where like you've got to get and plant that seed in my head. I've not seen it enough. I've not seen it 7 to 12 times.
Yeah, so you really need to be active, and this reminds me of being at the Grove Theater in the summertime, and they had the shows we went to. There was a big presenting sponsor, so I think that was a good way. They got some recognition, and I think that probably cost a bit more. They were bigger businesses. Some of them were businesses that I think maybe weren't as well known. So it was good for them to get there in front of a bunch of people. But also, I think on the list, there was businesses I've never even heard of. And then when I tried to look them up, I couldn't find anything. So I was like, who is this person? And in those cases, they probably just, it was kind of a waste of money for them as a marketing exercise. But if you are doing events, and especially if if your target market's showing up there, it makes it a better spot for you to be.
Yeah, and the thing I go back to now also, and not to just repeat what you said and mansplain it again, but it doesn't matter if you've got the most beautiful billboard or this. Now we're veering off, not totally events, but just in general, it's more of a conversation about traditional marketing. It doesn't matter if you've got those things. You need somewhere to people to go back to, and it has to be your website. And if it's not your website, maybe it's social. Very small percent. But if it's your website, and if you don't have a website, you're in trouble. If you can't be found on Google because people might not remember your name exactly, you're going to be in trouble. You need to be able to have that infrastructure set up that, okay, people see that billboard while they're racing down 35. How do they get back to you later? Yeah. How do you keep them engaged? How are they getting a hold of you if you don't have social, if you don't have a website, if you can't be found on Google? The billboard itself is just the spark. It's not even the spark, really. I'm trying to, I'm all over the place with analogies in this conversation, but if you're building a fire, it's the kindling. It's just part of it. It's part of the process.
Yeah, you need to have. I just think in this, the best billboards that I always remember are places to eat in cottage towns.
Sure.
Where it's best burger ever in 5 minutes, turn right at this stop or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's very specific. And even now, those with the advent of, Google, some people might have already planned where they're going, but, those are good for, those surprises sometimes. But that fits very specific to one type of business. So I think, to steer us towards wrapping up, I think events can be really good, I think, or they can be a complete waste of money. Mm-hmm. There's probably not a lot of middle ground, because either you have a bunch of marketing activity and you're reinforcing that, or you have no marketing activity and you're relying on that as kind of a silver bullet for you. And it's probably not going to be effective, but used properly, don't sleep on events, right? Because sometimes, walking into the Lex is where you want your banner to be. I think of trade shows, especially, you might want to be, in a certain spot where people in that industry are coming together and you're going to see them all.
Yeah. I think, frankly, people think that I hate traditional marketing or I hate sponsorship, and it's not the case. 7 or 8 years ago, we're going on 8 years in a few months of doing digital marketing. The conversation always started with, why do you hate traditional marketing? Or why is digital better? I don't have that conversation anymore with people, which is really interesting to think about the evolution of those conversations. Now it's strictly okay, I want to do this because of this type of thing. I now think that I never dismiss any opportunity that comes my way. I've had this conversation with the team at Thrive where they got a letter in the mail. I think it was some sort of women's group, women in business type of group. And they kind of laughed it off. I don't even remember the name, and like it's probably better that I don't remember the name, but they immediately were like, this is silly. Like, why would you do that? I'm like, whoa. Like, let's look into it first. We need to find out like who's going to be in that room. It was an event like to go to and like pay for. I was like, find out who's in that room. Find out if it's a legit company. Find out like basically who's going to be in that room. Like, do we want to be the ones that are leading the charge? Like, are we the best people in that room, or are there a bunch of other people that are way ahead of us that we want to make sure like we can go meet? Like, this is a great networking opportunity type of thing. So, long story short, to bring back what I was saying though, is like, I am critical of every single opportunity that comes my way. Whether it's like I get invited to sponsor events, I get invited to put stuff in publications and billboards and digital like restaurant type of screens. I've had those conversations and thought about all that stuff. I don't always say no. I don't immediately say no. Like, you have to be critical about these things and like, how does it fit into the grand scheme of what you're doing? So
I think it's a great way to end on, and make sure it fits a budget. Make sure you have a budget so you can fit in these different types of things, and critically think them through. And usually the best offers make sense for you. They're like, oh, that's X number of dollars and I get this, and that makes sense, so just do it. And a final thought for me is sometimes you mentioned who's going to be in that room. Some of the best opportunities are in rooms you have to pay to get into. That's in my career. All sorts of things have been, did I pay to get in that room? Yes. And, something great has come out of it. So, just knowing that sometimes you just got to pay for the best traffic and the best eyes to get on your brand. And, once you start figuring out where that comes from, it starts making those decisions a lot easier. Awesome. If you would like to talk to us about event sponsorships, or what is the right mix for your business, we'd love to do that.
Sponsor this podcast.
You could sponsor this podcast and get your stuff on the ears of our businesses that listen to us every week. If you'd like to be on the show, we'd love to have you here as well. So you can do all of those things with a simple email. You can reach out to us at setitup@kawarthasmallbusinesspodcast.ca.